Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for this kind of introduction. I'm very glad to meet everyone in this space. As you've heard, my name is Gilbert Sendugwa. I'm with the Africa Freedom of Information Center, which is the largest CSO network that promotes the right to information and open contracting in Africa. So when it comes to COVID-19, and specifically the situation in Africa, I think the context and problem is that we have big sums of money involved, whether they are grants, loans, but also locally generated resources. We also have not only high, but the need for quick spending to respond to the crisis. And this has triggered a huge risk for corruption, but because of limited or lack of disclosure, relaxation of oversight measures, and obviously a lot of misallocations and misappropriation of public resources that are dedicated to COVID-19 response. Next slide, please. Next slide, you can. So, back, please. Oh, back. So, could you please go to the second slide? So, just as an example, looking at one agency, this is the IMF. It has corruption and poor governance because of lack of disclosure, relaxation of oversight mechanisms, but also we note misallocations and misappropriation, funds which are raised to respond to COVID, but are spent on other things other than COVID response. Now, I'd like to give an example when it comes to resources that are being directed to the response. Next slide, please. So IMF alone has committed 50.9 billion to be spent in sub-Saharan Africa. And you can see here a number of countries and how much IMF is contributing. And these are led by South Africa at 4.3 billion. And then followed by Nigeria at 3.4 billion. And then you have, other countries taking the rest. Ethiopia, for example, at $411 million, Uganda, 492 million, among others. This is just IMF, but also World Bank, the EU, and other countries have provided large amounts of money. Now, when it comes to cases of corruption, I've picked 3 examples. In Cameroon, for example, 4,000 bags of COVID relief rice was instead sold. It was procured using money that had been mobilized for COVID, but then sold at $40 million. In Uganda, we have top officials in the office of the Prime Minister who are now facing trial for inflating procurements for COVID relief items. And then in Zimbabwe, the health minister has been implicated in an award of multi-million contract for COVID testing kits. So these are some of the examples to show that the problem is real and is not specific to particular countries, but is also widespread. Now, looking at what you'd call risks, nature of risks, the issue of lack of transparency and disclosure is a major one. Now, what we see mainly is that announcements that, for example, the World Bank has committed $1 billion to Ghana or 500 million to Uganda, and there's a provision, particularly in documentation by IMF and World Bank, requiring these governments to disclose information on procurements under this COVID-19 response. But in practice, this information is not being disclosed. The other issue is relates to lack of business ethics and internal controls and compliance with existing procedures. On the first issue in Uganda, for example, we have engaged the government, the Public Procurement Regulator of Public Assets Authority, and they have responded positively by developing and issuing guidelines for emergency procurements. Because at the start of the problem, we looked at the government procurement portal to see if they have published procurement plans for COVID-19 as required. This information was not being published, and we raised this red flag, and the government has issued guidelines. Now, the challenge is that the guidelines are also not being followed. One can say they were only raised last week, the guidelines, but by now we expect that disclosure should be happening so that we're able to use this data to monitor. Now, as an organization and our partners in various countries, next slide please, I've highlighted some of the tools that we have developed, and also what we have done is we're working with the government transparency dashboard for red flagging. This was originally looking at general procurements, but we are also now linking this to COVID procurements. So if you follow that link, you'll see that dashboard. We have also developed a check and disseminated a checklist for proactive disclosure of COVID-19 information. And this has been disseminated in several countries where we have membership. We have also a dashboard that is tracking COVID resources specifically. And here we want to thank IMF because they have proactively disclosed this information. And if you follow this link, you will see how much is there. We have engaged the EU, we have engaged the World Bank, and as soon as this data becomes available, we shall also update it. We are also monitoring contracts, and in that link, we have shared a report which we released last week, and you'll see that it is based on 5 indicators: disclosure, efficiency in procurement, competition, and value for money. And you will see on each of those indicators in the 4 sectors that we studied in Uganda, all of them are performing poorly.